What's up, everybody? Nick Dwyer back with you for the 10th inning, giving you another episode of This Day in Sports History. In yesterday's episode, we saw Craig Biggio of the Houston Astros knock his 3,000th hit, becoming only the 27th member in MLB history to do so. We don't have any other players getting their 3,000th today, but we do have something that has only occurred one other time in MLB history. Let's see what it was. But before we get into it, if you all enjoy this video, leave a like on it. If you're new to the channel, you like what you see, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get into it. This Day in Sports History. We start out today with both golf and tennis. First, we start with tennis in 1895 at the U.S. National Championships. Juliet Atkinson beat defending champion Helen Hellwig 6-4, 6-2, 6-1 in straight sets. This would be Atkinson's first U.S. title and the first of 3 major titles on the singles side. 6 years later in 1901, we stay at the U.S. National Championship. Elizabeth Moore defeated defending champion Myrtle McAteer 6-4, 3-6, 7-5, 2-6, 6-2 in 5 sets. This would be her second of 4 U.S. singles titles. Now we move up to the U.S. Open in 1903, and Willie Anderson becomes the first person to win the U.S. Open twice, defeating runner-up David Brown by 2 strokes in an 18-hole playoff. This would be Anderson's second U.S. Open and the second of 4 majors in his career, as well as the first of 3 straight U.S. Open wins. 3 years later, we remain at the U.S. Open. Alex Smith wins the first of 2 U.S. Open titles, 7 strokes ahead of runner-up and younger brother Willie Smith. 4 years later, we hop across the pond, 1910 at Wimbledon in an all-British final. Dorothea Chambers defeated Dora Boothby 6-2, 6-2 in straight sets to win her 4th of 7 Wimbledon single titles. We take a quick break off of tennis and golf for a little bit, go to boxing in 1933. Primo Carnera knocks out defending champion Jack Sharkey in 6 rounds. This would be the second match between Carnera and Sharkey, and this would be revenge for Carnera as he would defeat Sharkey as he did not in the first one. With this victory, Carnera became the 3rd European to win the lineal world heavyweight belt. Now we go to 1934 at the British Open. Henry Cotton wins 5 strokes ahead of runner-up Sid Bruce for the first of 3 majors. 1 year later, at the 1935 LPGA Western Open, Opal Hill scored an easy 9-7 to win over Mrs. S.L. Reinhardt to claim her first of 2 consecutive major titles, her first of 2 majors in her career. 12 years later, at the 1947 U.S. Open, Betty Jamieson, with a score of 9 under, wins her only U.S. Open, 6 strokes ahead of runners-up Polly Riley and Sally Sessions. This would be the second of 3 overall majors for Jamieson. Now we go to 1950 in the World Cup, and the United States would end up defeating favorites England 1-0. This was just a random game in the World Cup. It's not like it was the final or anything. But this would be the last time the United States would win until 1994. Now we move to 1952 at the U.S. Open. On the women's side, the 1949 champion Louise Suggs, with a score of 8 over, wins 7 strokes ahead of runners-up Marlene Bauer and Betty Jamieson to win her 6th of 11 overall majors. 4 years later in 1956, we have a world record. Charles Dumas made the first high jump over 7 feet at 2.13 meters, getting 7 feet and 5/8 of an inch, and he would end up holding this world record for just over a year. 1 year later at the 1957 U.S. Open, on the women's side, Betty Rawls, with a score of 7 over, wins when the appearance champion Jackie Pung, at a score of 6 over, is disqualified for signing an incorrect scorecard that had the 4th hole marked as a par when in fact it was a bogey. Therefore, Rawls would get the victory and win her 4th of 8 overall majors. Now we go to the 1958 FIFA World Cup, and you can say it's the start of a dynasty for Brazil. Brazil was going up against Sweden in the final, and Brazil would end up winning 5-2. For Sweden, Niels Lidholm started the scoring off in the 4th minute, but for Brazil, Vava came right back in the 9th minute, tying it up. Then in the 32nd minute, added another goal, giving them the 2-1 lead going into halftime. After halftime, Brazil scored once again 10 minutes later in the 55th minute off of a Pelé goal. Then in the 68th minute, with Mario Zagallo giving them a 4-1 lead. Sweden would try to bounce back though. In the 80th minute, a goal by Tore Simonsson gave it a 4-2 lead for Brazil. But then Pelé came back in the final minute of the game, scoring once again, giving him 2 goals for the day, and Vava 2 goals, giving Brazil their first World Cup title of 5 overall. Now we move up to 1969 at the US Open on the women's side. Donna Caponi-Young, at a score of 2 over, wins her first of 4 major titles, defeating runner-up Peggy Wilson by 1 stroke. 11 years later at the 1980 US Senior Open, Robert DiVincenzo, with a score of 1 over, wins the inaugural event by 4 strokes ahead of runner-up and amateur William C. Campbell. 3 years later, in 1983, at a win at the Belmont Racecourse, not the Belmont Stakes, Angel Cordero would win his 5,000th horse race. 3 years later, at the 1986 FIFA World Cup final, Argentina would defeat West Germany 3-2. For Argentina, Jose Brown started off the scoring in the 23rd minute, giving them a 1-0 lead, going into halftime. After halftime, Jorge Valdano scored in the 56th minute, giving Argentina a 2-0 lead. But West Germany would score 20 minutes later off of a Karl Rummenigge goal in the 74th minute, making it a 2-1 game. 9 minutes later, Rudolf Voller scored in the 83rd minute to tie the game 2-2. Not trying to get this game going into extra time, Argentina's Jorge Burruchaga scored in the 86th minute, giving Argentina the game-winning goal and their second World Cup title. On the same day as Argentina won their second World Cup, at the US Senior Open, Dale Douglas, with a score of 9 under, wins 1 stroke ahead of Gary Player for his only Champions Tour major title. Now in 1990, you get something that you just don't see every day. The Oakland Athletics' Dave Stewart no-hit the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Dodgers' Fernando Valenzuela no-hits the St. Louis Cardinals, making this only the second time in Major League Baseball history that there were 2 no-hitters that occurred on the same date. The other one occurring in 1898. This would be a little bit different though, because this would be the first time no-hitters would occur in both leagues on the same day. Let's start out with Dave Stewart. On the day, Stewart, 9 innings pitched, 3 walks allowed, 12 strikeouts, as he would no-hit the Blue Jays. Now Valenzuela, as they defeated the Cardinals 6-0, 9 innings pitched, 3 walks, 7 strikeouts on the day. If that was anything to go based off, when it occurred, when the last one occurred, we'll have to wait until about 2084 for it to happen again. Now we move to 1997 at the US Senior Open. Graham Marsh, who played an even par over the 4 rounds, wins 1 stroke ahead of runner-up John Bland. Now we stay at the US Senior Open, but we move up to 2003. Bruce Lietzke, with a score of 6 under, wins 2 strokes ahead of runner-up Tom Watson. 5 years later, we stick with golf, but we move over to the US Open on the women's side. Inbee Park, with a score of 9 under, wins her first of 7 major titles, 4 strokes ahead of runner-up Helen Alfredson. Also in 2008, at the UEFA European Championship final, Spain was going up against Germany, and Spain would end up winning 1-0 off of a Fernando Torres goal in the 33rd minute, giving Spain the 1-0 lead and the victory for their second Euro title. Finally, in 2014, at the Senior Players Championship, Bernard Langer, with a score of 15 under, defeated Jeff Sluman after a birdie on the second playoff hole. This would be the first of Langer's 3 straight Players' titles victory. So there you have it. That's what happened on this day in sports history. If I left anything out, I do apologize. If I mispronounced any names, I also apologize. But for Nick Dwyer and the 10th inning, I will see all of you tomorrow. Have a great one. See ya.